I caught on pretty quick that I was HIV positive or that I had AIDS, because that was, the status at the time. They were, I think it was like a commercial for like AZT or something, and I was like, and it said it was for AIDS, and I was like, I have that, and my aunt was like, well, I guess it's time to have a conversation. But I was 4. I grew up in inner city Chicago. I was born HIV positive, and I am 35 years old. Growing up was kind of a struggle with HIV, especially in that time, because there was so much that was unknown. So especially as a toddler, other people and their parents didn't want to let me play with their kids because they were so afraid that I would pass HIV on to them, even though that wasn't, we know now that's not, something to be afraid of. But, I experienced isolation and seclusion. I had to entertain myself with my own toys and being kind of in the corner by myself a lot. When I was 4, I actually learned how to put in my own feeding tube. It was because my body wasn't absorbing the nutrients that it needed from the food I was eating. I could eat all day long. And when they first put it in, I had like 4 nurses like kind of anchoring me down. I'm just little bitty thing. I was 4 and I looked like I was 2 when my aunt saw how traumatic it was for me to be held down. Because I'm very timid and shy, but I was very compliant. You tell me to do something and I'll do it. You don't need to hold me down. And so my aunt talked to the nurses, and she was always very forward with me, even as a 4-year-old, but she talked to the nurses, and the nurses agreed to allow me to put my own feeding tube in. So they like marked the tube for as long as it, needed to go. And my aunt talked me through it, and she was like, okay, just this way you can stop and go as you please, And within the week, I learned how to put in my own feeding tube. And it meant instead of basically living life in the hospital, I could go home. Most of my HIV that affected me was within my childhood. So I spent a lot of time in and out of hospitals. I had pneumonia every single year, whether it was winter or summer, it didn't matter. At 10 was when I got pneumonia, and I was in the hospital for over 30 days. My viral load was out of control. They had the medicines that they were trying to have me on, such as AZT and DDI and all these classic medications, I guess you could say. They were trying them all, and the side effects were worse than the actual benefit of them. School was hard because half the time I was either throwing up or, needing the bathroom in some way. And for you to be a kid experiencing them, it's hard to explain what you're feeling, And so your parents always just have to react like, oh, okay, that's the sick feeling. Okay, we're gonna, I was so sick that it affected my education. It affected where I even got my education, because I had so many medications that I had to go to a school that had a nurse that would actually give me my meds. The way school went for me in middle school was the fundamental, times was if I was tired, I would go to the nurse's office, which was the principal, and there was gym mats that she had in the corner. And I'd lay down, I'd take a nap, and then whenever I'd wake up, I'd go back to class. And so I was picked on a lot because they thought, I was favored and I could just come and go as I pleased. When in reality, when you're in middle school, they structure your day, right? The first hour is math, the second hour is history. Well, whatever I slept through, I then didn't get that learning in. So I struggled a lot in school because there were so many gaps in my education because of sleeping or being sick or being out in the hospital. When I was 10, everything they were doing had just stopped working. And in the midnight hour, our pastors praying over me and everything, they found the right cocktail, so the right combination of medicines. So 7 pills twice a day, so 14 pills. And that was my saving grace from my 23 pills with 8 different doses per day. That was a turning point for me where I feel like my life began at 10. I've played softball for as long as I can remember, and it's for as long as I've been able, and it's since I was 10. And then 15 was when my advocacy started, because I was in a club at school called AIDS Action Club. So I asked them if I could tell my story to the class, because we had no human influence, to understand AIDS or HIV, just movies and questions. And that was where I really started to understand how my story could kind of hopefully influence other people, not only who had HIV, but those who were born with it. as a kid there was death dates, there was expiration dates that were given to us. And when you survive all of those but are still in your mind thinking that you still have an expiration date at some point, you don't really think ahead. I think with having HIV now as an older person, I worry how it will affect me, but how it's affecting me long term because of all the things that I went through as a kid and all the medicines that I was on that still aren't really long-term studied, because they said, well, these will keep you alive for now. You know, they're at least keeping you alive for a little longer. And it wasn't so much, well, 30 years from now, you might still be, you know, alive, and who knows what, you know, I don't know, you know, side effects or things that you might have from things that you don't even take anymore. So the term dandelions within the movement, really it's us reclaiming lifetime survivors and the fact that we have lived our entire lives with it, and to not let ourselves be drowned out by long-term survivors as a term. We feel like we're the forgotten population because there's so few of us within the world. There's less than 10,000 of us at this time. We, the Dandelions, are trying to create a national network of people that are all the babies from the 80s up to the 2000s, really. We need to know what our future looks like. We are different than long-term survivors, though we fall into that category as well. At the end of the day, dandelions withstand it all. They'll take over, right? If you have one dandelion in the grass, at the end of the day, they'll take over. And so instead of using vertical, instead of using, you know, perinatal, we are dandelions and we are the lifetime survivors. As an advocate, what I am the most proud of at this point in my life is being a part of the HIVstopswithme.org campaign. I feel like telling my story is what was my purpose. It's why I survived when I was 10. And ever since then, I've been telling my story, just like, there's a reason why I'm here. I don't know what it is yet, but there's a reason why I'm here. I'll just keep telling my story until I figure it out. If what I can do is be on a campaign and tell my story, and even just that helps one person feel like they feel safe enough to get tested and or feel like they're not alone, that's what I live for. My campaign manager, when I was telling my story this past year in training, he stopped and he said, I feel like you're living your dream right now. And I started crying, like I'm kind of getting emotional now, because I didn't realize until that moment, like I really was. I didn't want anything more than to be in a room full of people also HIV positive, all with the same motive, sending the same message. You know, like we're family, we're siblings. Because year one, I was like kind of just shy, like, hi, how are you? And then now year four, I'm like, all right, we're here. Let's do this, you know? But I wouldn't be able to do that without my family.